We are connecting to Facebook. Done, redirecting. All right. And then in the webinar, we are going to start. All right, here we go. All right, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today we have a very exciting and special webinar about the college admissions process, and we are joined by some very illustrious faculty members from around the country. And our main presenter today will be Dr. Brady Spitz, who teaches at the University of Tennessee Martin. We also have with us today Pablo Rieppi, who teaches at Oberlin College and also at Juilliard Pre-College, and Dr. Todd Meehan, who is at Baylor University. And joining us later will be Josh Torres, who's the director of percussion at Center Grove High School. So Brady is going to take us away today. He's going to be giving us a presentation all about this topic of successfully navigating music admissions. So we're very excited. Thank you everyone for being here. And Brady, how you doing?
I'm great, Josh. Thanks so much. Let me pull this up here. So, yeah, like what Josh was saying, today we're talking about the college application process. And usually when I talk to students about applying for college to be a music major in any fashion, a lot of times what the focus is for the student and their family is on the audition itself and not the rest of the application. So we're going to focus on the whole picture of your application today, which is quite different from a normal college application experience. And we will talk some about the audition, which is, I know, a focal point, but then we're also going to talk about all the other things that maybe become hiccups for families as they navigate this process.
And I just want to quickly, sorry to interrupt you, Brady. I just want to quickly let everyone know who's on the stream, because we already have 20 people joining us here right now, which is awesome, that at the bottom of your screen, you have a few options there to chat or raise your hand or do a Q&A. And what I recommend you all doing is, as you're going along, if you have any questions or thoughts about the presentation, go ahead and drop the question into the Q&A so that afterwards all of our panel members and Dr. Spitz can help you, with those questions, help answer your questions and get a dialogue going. And for the rest of the webinar, I'm going to go ahead and step out until we start that Q&A again. I'm going to turn off my video, and that'll give Brady a little bit more screen space there. So any questions, guys, you can shoot them in the chat for all of our attendee members if you have any questions, and I'll be here on the chat with you. All right. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, and definitely any questions you have, drop them in there, because we're gonna get into it. This presentation is not very long, and we have a lot of great panelists with a lot of great information. So let's get started. So the first step is selecting a school. And some people, especially if you're a senior in high school right now, you may have already started thinking about what schools you want, or you may already have a couple of schools narrowed down. They're like your top choices. But for those of you who maybe are not already a senior in high school or have not already narrowed that down, let's talk about selecting the right type of school, because music schools come in different varieties other than just a public or a private university. They also have conservatories, and then they have conservatories inside of universities and college settings. And then there's different department structures inside of all of those things. And they all have a little bit of a different flavor depending on what you're looking for. So if we just kind of go down the list, a conservatory is a type of school where only music or only the arts are featured, and you generally don't get some type of broader liberal arts education. So you're not going to be taking a lot of like math and US history and things like that as a part of your college degree. It's going to be really focused on just the one thing. And that's places like Juilliard, but also, Peabody or Colburn, some types of these schools. And then within universities, sometimes universities can contain conservatories within them, like the Cincinnati Conservatory, Oberlin, Rice, Eastman is sort of loosely affiliated with the University of Rochester. These are all different kind of relationships between conservatories and a broader university. And then, of course, we have the university structure, whether it's a public or a private school, functions a lot similar to the way the rest of the university functions. So even though you're in a music school, you'll still end up taking these liberal arts courses that contribute towards your degree plan. And each one of these things offers sort of a different, like I was saying, flavor, a type of experience. But it's just important to know that they are different. So when you start shopping around or looking around, you're sort of going for the thing that you really want to be doing with your education. So I like to start the idea of selecting schools by asking kind of what you want to do when you grow up. And I think a lot of people focus on the idea of what kind of career you want to have. Do you want to be a band director? Do you want to be a performer? What? That's a great question to ask, but maybe a better way to target yourself is to think, what kind of music do you want to make when you graduate? So if you are someone who enjoys being a sort of collaborative musician, then maybe you want to go to a program that focuses more on chamber music. If you love playing drum set, then maybe it's important for you to focus on a school that does jazz. If you like interacting with younger students, then maybe being an music education person is good for you. And every musician ends up doing some combination of playing and teaching anyway, but I think it's important to sort of assess what type of music you want to be making rather than what career you want to have, because we do have kind of almost like a multidisciplinary existence as a musician, whether you're an educator or a performer or somewhere in between. And a lot of the answers as far as what schools you want to go to, they can be figured out by the kind of answers you have to that question of what type of music you want to make. So what type of faculty relationships do you want to have? What size of school? What majors do you want to have offered? All that is derived from the answer to the question of what type of music you want to make. So I would start there, and then you can start your searching based on that. Now, if we start thinking about majors, there's sort of general categories for majors that a lot of schools have. So this is, you can have a performance degree, which is sort of like it was kind of the first music degree. It's just any type of performance. Sometimes it's called applied performance. Sometimes there are specialty elements to it. So for percussionists, a lot of people will get a performance degree in just classical performance or straight ahead performance. And some of that has some drum set emphasis or some world music emphasis to it, but you're going to sort of get the core concert percussion instruments. But there are places that focus on jazz and drum set, some places that focus on being more multidisciplinary with world music or things like that, still under the performance umbrella. The degree that you come out of on the other side of that is usually a Bachelor of Music, or sometimes a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, depending on where you go, but usually it's a Bachelor of Music. Then there's also a music education path, which I would say is not a backup plan. Some people may disagree with me, but I tend to think that you really you need to want to teach kids and be involved with transmitting music to children in some capacity to get a music education degree. Because it's really intense. Getting a music education degree is sometimes more intense than getting a performance degree, because you end up getting methods classes and psychology of education and classroom management courses and things that are very rigorous, and you end up putting in more hours maybe than a performance major just in this coursework, right? That ends with some type of licensure towards a K through 12 degree, and you can kind of select elementary education or like secondary education or any number of things. And that'll come usually with a Bachelor of Music or sometimes a Bachelor of Music Education, sometimes a Bachelor of Science if the music ed degree comes out of the Liberal Arts and Sciences college from within the university. It doesn't really matter what type of bachelor's degree you end up with that much, but you should know that it may be different than a BM if you're getting a BS in music education. And then sort of a big one that's blowing up right now is a Bachelor of Arts degree, which is less music courses, but then you end up having to select from a battery of elective courses that sort of supplement that. And this is to sort of help, you usually pick your electives or in consultation with an advisor, or you pick some type of elective pathway to get to a tailored coursework for more specialty areas within the music industry. So this can be like live sound and event management, music business, and some places you can also get like church music or like music therapy as part of a BA. And so this helps focus your degree down on that without being so focused on the core sort of elements of being percussion. Usually you still have to take theory and history and all the sort of basic lower division classes like other music majors, but then you pick an elective plan that tailors you towards a non-performance or a non-education based career. And that's actually really popular right now. You can also find places that have dedicated bachelors in music therapy, although most music therapy degrees or most music therapy careers require at least a master's degree and licensure in therapy or counseling. So that's something to be aware of, although that's also a great field to go into. And then you can also add music as a minor, or in some cases a certificate, onto a degree that you already have. So it's quite common for people to do some type of degree and then a music minor just to be able to participate in music in college if you don't want to straight ahead be a major in music in some fashion. And again, this choice can a lot of times be determined by what type of music you want to make when you get done with your degree. So keep considering that question as you're going through things. And then there's a few other things to sort of consider when you're picking schools. Classes are really important, and the relationship with your teacher is really important. But, you know, is it a big university or a small university? Is it in a large city? Sometimes that relates to your ability to get gigs or to take private teaching opportunities or even to do internships if you're doing a Bachelor of Arts, right? Is the mission of the school important to you? So do you want to attend a school with a religious mission? Are you trying to go towards being a religious musician of some type? Is it important to you that your professors play for a living? And I think a lot of people would gravitate towards yes, but there are pros and cons, because a professor that is playing constantly sometimes has problems focusing down on their students. Sometimes. A lot of times it's not an issue. I don't want to shy anyone away from that, because I've studied with several teachers, great teachers, who are also players, but that can happen. So is it important to you that your professors are not playing in a symphony orchestra, right? And they're at school on campus more often. And then ultimately, what type of success do they have at placing their students and where their students go? Whether that's teaching in a public school or a private school, or whether that's placing them in a performing ensemble or in music industry somewhere. You want to know where the alumni are going and what they're doing. And all those things can sort of help you narrow down what schools you're looking at. So if we keep going, related to what type of school you're looking at, how you get admitted is a complicated issue for musicians. If you're just getting like an accounting degree or a biology degree, you know, you have to be admitted to the university, and then at some point you may have to be admitted to your specialty program while you're already in the university. But for musicians, there's sort of a threefold process for what we have to do to be admitted to a college. You usually need to be admitted to the larger school based on some type of admission standards. This can be done through Common App, or it can be done through any number of admissions websites. The school usually takes admissions on their own, and they'll do it in a rolling process. A lot of schools will do it in a rolling process, meaning to say that they'll accept your application kind of throughout the year, your senior year, or they might accept admission, early admission as a junior if you're in that situation. But on top of that university admission, you also usually need to be admitted to the College of Music or the College of Arts and Sciences or the music department specifically. So it's important to understand what the structure of the institution that we're talking about is. There's the university system, if you're talking about a university and not a conservatory. And then there are colleges within that. So like the College of Liberal Arts, the College of Sciences, the College of Engineering, the College of Music, or sometimes it's called the College of Fine Arts or the College of Arts and Sciences, the College of Arts and Humanities. And then within those colleges, there are also departments. So the Department of Music and the Department of Visual Arts and the Department of Theater might all exist within the College of Arts and Sciences. And every school is a little bit different. That's just sort of how they've chosen to structure their own governance. So it doesn't make a whole lot of difference for you, but you should know that you have to be admitted to the university and the music department. And your admission to the music department is contingent upon your audition, and there's usually a firm deadline and not a rolling admission deadline for that. Or at least they try and make it a firm deadline, although COVID has kind of screwed things up a little bit with that. So all of that is based on the audition, and in some cases also an interview as a part of your audition. So keep that in mind when you narrow down your list of schools. Are you able to sort of pin down the requirements to get admission to each of the three areas, or to university admission, audition, which then may also relate to your college or your music department admission? So this is sort of essential information that you want to start gathering by the start of your senior year in high school. You know, I think everyone has a different idea of what a deadline is, but I would say that you probably want to have a good list of schools by the start of your senior year of high school, and then start gathering some of this information either the summer before your senior year or at the beginning of your senior year. So know when all the university admission deadlines are and whether they're rolling or firm deadlines, what supplementary materials like essays you have to do. You want to be able to answer questions about need-based and merit-based financial aid. Then you want to also have an idea about what the admission deadlines is for the Department of Music or the College of Music, and what supplementary materials, if any, are related to that. And I'll just say, as a general, most of the things that I see with regard to Department of Music admissions and applications deadlines, usually they want to see your application for the College of Music or the Department of Music by about December 1st. And then they start scheduling auditions the middle to the end of January through March. So that's kind of a generic timeline for that. Every school is a little bit different, but December 1st is a date that pops out pretty strongly to me when I help students start applying for school. And then the college or department will help you figure out audition requirements, but that's going to involve the dates for the auditions, of which there are several, the repertoire expectations for the auditions, and then you can also inquire with the teacher at the school if there's a preview lesson or some type of mini lesson you can have with them to get to know them a little bit, or even just meet up. And then sometimes if you do a campus visit, you can also observe percussion ensemble rehearsals, band, wind ensemble, orchestra rehearsals, things like that. And that's always a good thing to do to sort of get a flavor for how the school is going to operate. So this is being recorded, so you can go back and check it out. But just to recap, university admissions, then usually College of Music or Department of Music audition or application deadline, usually by December 1st, and then be looking for all of the studio audition dates to start in the very early spring semester. Then we get to the audition itself, and the audition inevitably consists of some combination of these hard skills. So this includes concert snare drum, potentially rudimental snare drum as well, 2-mallet keyboard, 4-mallet keyboard, timpani, and then drum set or other areas of emphasis, which could include some type of world percussion, if that's something that you've had experience with before you get to college. That's always something good to sort of bring to an audition. Normally with an undergraduate audition, they go somewhat quick, so you may not get to everything or all of everything, but I think that's always good to, if you've studied, you know, if you've studied conjura or tabla or something in your, as a high school student, I think it's always worth at least talking about that in your audition and sort of bringing your musical experience to the table, even if you don't get a chance to play it. But you will have to demonstrate at least concert snare drum and 2-mallet keyboards, and timpani is also usually a good one. And then rudimental snare drum, 4-mallet keyboard, and drum set are usually optional, although every school's requirements are a little bit different. So you need to be fluent in the web pages of all of the different music schools and their percussion audition requirements. Some schools require concert snare drum, rudimental snare drum, 2-mallet keyboard, 4-mallet keyboard, and timpani as a part of an undergraduate audition, and then drum set is optional. Sometimes drum set's not optional. It's kind of just up to every individual school. But at this point, you should know that you're going to be at least responsible for concert snare drum and 2-mallet keyboard. And you want to put your best foot forward with any of this stuff. So you want to understand what the requirements are, and then you want to pick repertoire that is, you know, that you're going to just absolutely nail. And we'll get into this when we do the Q&A with the panel later, but it's pretty common knowledge among teachers, or it's a pretty common, I think, sentiment among teachers that it's much better for you to play something simpler and absolutely slay it than it is to try and play something super hard and just kind of hack through it. We want to see what you can do and see the top of your musicianship, because that shows us potential, and less, sort of like, can we play Merlin when we're 16 years old? It's not necessary. Okay. But the great thing is that you are displaying a bunch of other skills, soft skills, and your personality through the audition process that are in some cases as important as how well you play the concert snare drum etude that you bring in. So I think being super punctual, which includes not just the day of the audition, but also super punctual with all of your communications, being professional with all your communications, and how you interact with sort of everyone on staff is important. Are you prepared? Are you prepared both musically and professionally? So when I used to have students audition for college, I would make them prepare a binder that had a basic resume in it and had all their audition repertoire, clean copies of their repertoire. I think showing that level of professionalism and preparedness, it demonstrates skills for a panel that are important. And then throughout the audition, you may be given an opportunity to interact with the professor in some way that allows you to showcase teachability. So they may come up to you and say, hey, can you try this way? Or can you play this role a little bit softer? Or can you try bringing out your number 4 out a little bit more so we can hear that line? And the more you can kind of do that and show that you're malleable and that you can sort of roll with the punches and really try and get what they're throwing at you, that demonstrates teachability. And I think it's been my experience in auditioning students that their ability to sort of like go with the flow is more important than whether or not they actually accomplish the thing that we're throwing at them. If they make an honest attempt at it and they make some progress, but they don't get super flustered, that's something that I notice. And through all of these things, you want to showcase personality. So you want to make sure that you're, with everyone that you interact with, you're kind and easygoing. A sense of humor, if you've got one. If you don't, probably best not to tell dad jokes. But if you have one, professors are people too. And I always value, I put down intention and focus. But I always value these things where you kind of know what you want to do. You know what kind of music you want to make and the type of people you want to interact with. You have intention for your career. Whether or not that means you have a major or a job picked out, you are at least intentionally searching for what you want to do. I think that's a really valuable skill and not necessarily something that people think about right off the bat. And then if you're focused towards that goal. So these are both hard and soft skills. And the repertoire that you pick, if you have a private teacher, you should absolutely talk to them about it. If you don't, a lot of times the colleges that you're applying to will have sample repertoire listed on their website. And then at the very least, I also think that you can draw from the etudes that have been selected for all state or all region. That's a place to start, Perhaps a good place to start would be looking at your all state material, and it's like, okay, I nailed that. And the professor that I'm going to audition for is going to see 17 people play that this year. So maybe I should find the book that etude's from and play a different one. So I'm not just one of part of the crowd. That's a smart decision. Okay, so you get through with the audition. You've sort of navigated sort of the admissions process. It's important to also talk a little bit about financial aid. So financial aid is a difficult subject, and it's controlled by several different parties within any college or university. So they're sort of split up in terms of merit or general aid and then need-based aid. The need-based aid is usually determined by the FAFSA, which is filled out by you and your parents the summer before classes begin at the very latest. And that influences things like need-based scholarships and grants, and also it also determines work study. And then on top of that, there are sort of general academic scholarships and things like you can do, participating in honors college. If you graduate top 10% in your class, some places will give you a scholarship automatically. If you get a certain ACT score, that's all controlled by sort of the main part of campus. And then the music scholarships are determined in consultation between a studio teacher and the rest of the department. And then, of course, on top of that, there are also private scholarships that are available through outside organizations and nonprofits and things like that. So if we look at specifically the music scholarships, because that's really all that we have influence over. So let's talk about that. So the studio teachers will assess your potential, and they'll usually give that, they're either given the ability to dole out scholarships, or they're given the ability to sort of rate their applicants based on their, how well they would do with scholarship, or how much they need, or how much they should be offered based on their potential. But studio teachers and even the Department of Music have very little to no say in academic merit-based aid, and certainly not need-based aid, since that's determined by your FAFSA. Assessing the student's candidacy for financial aid is about seeing their potential and not necessarily the absolute achievement in the audition room itself. So COVID has made things kind of weird with auditions, admissions, and also financial aid. And so you should just know that whatever the picture is for the studio teacher, they've got several things tugging at them to dole out financial aid every year. And that includes how well the studio or the department have been able to fundraise for scholarships, so the sort of financial development of the university, any sort of endowment underfundings that have happened, financial allocations, perhaps, COVID has affected a lot. So there's only so much that your studio teacher can do, but usually that's focused on music scholarships themselves. And the best thing you can do for all of that is just, if there's an essay for the Department of Music thing, just write a good essay and then play a good audition. And that's sort of how you can affect your financial aid from a musical perspective, outside of need or merit-based academic scholarships. You should also know that most schools, or many schools anyway, incentivize large ensemble participation. So marching band or spring concert band is sometimes subsidized not just for music majors, but for all majors. Not always. I don't want to speak in too broad of a generality here, but or generalization. But marching band, you can get a scholarship for being involved in. Sometimes there are multiple orchestras on a university campus. So as a music major, you can participate in the orchestra for majors, but sometimes there are also university-wide orchestras that can provide modest amounts of scholarship money, even for people who are non-majors. And then there's also pep bands, basketball bands, and that sometimes is funded through scholarship, but oftentimes that can also be funded on a per service basis. So you might be given a blanket amount of money for playing one basketball game. And if you get scheduled out for playing 15 basketball games throughout the season, you get X amount of money. That's financial aid, but it's a little different. But that's available, right? So if you're looking at a school and you're like, okay, my financial aid almost covers things, but I'm a good drum set player and I need to, pay for my groceries. Well, from like November, December through March, you have a little bit of income potentially. And this is very miscellaneous, but some schools have other activities like mariachi or other specialty ensembles that you might be able to participate in that offer modest amounts of scholarship money as well. That's very rare, but there are these things. So if you keep your eye out when you're starting to look for schools, sometimes those opportunities exist. Once you get to school, this is not necessarily a money thing, but there are fraternities and sororities that you can participate in that are dedicated to musical activities. And although they don't necessarily always have scholarships or financial aid attached to them, they can, but they also allow you to develop relationships with donors and alumni that could be helpful for funding certain parts of your education or helping you find a job afterwards. So that's always, I think, a sort of tertiary thing to think about when you're thinking about financial aid, is what sort of alumni network can sort of push you out the door at the end of things. So let's say you get accepted. That usually happens potentially as early as a couple of weeks after your audition date. Some schools roll their admissions, they roll their acceptance letters out immediately following things. They sort of push the paperwork through if a student gets accepted, and you'll know soon enough. But some hold all their decisions and they release them all at the end. And so you'll have to know that some schools do one thing and some schools do another. And that's unfortunate to have to wait, but it is what it is. Undergrad decision day is May 1st. So that's the date at which you have to decide whether or not you're going to attend that school. And if a school of music is accredited by NASM, which is the National Association of Schools of Music, they're required to hold your place and your financial aid until May 1st. And usually most schools will try and push out all their acceptance stuff by April 1st. So you have a month to sort of figure out what you want to do. So there's the idea of negotiating, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Grad students do it more. Undergrads probably shouldn't negotiate. You can't negotiate general or merit-based aid. Usually, you certainly can't negotiate need-based aid because that's controlled by various government entities. And you almost, without exception, can't negotiate your acceptance to the school as an undergrad. So if you have been accepted or you've been admitted to a studio and your scholarship offer is not like low by choice, but let's say you have like your top school and they gave you $1,000 scholarship, but you really need like $1,500 to make it worth it over your second choice school, that may be worth having a conversation about. No is certainly a potential answer because sometimes scholarships are just block like $1,000 or block $1,500, but it may be worth having a conversation about something small like that. I would say always be honest in your motivations and just be prepared for no in most of those situations because negotiation really doesn't happen that much, even though it's talked about as a thing you might be able to do. But once you decide to sign, you're going to have a contract that says you're going to attend that school, and there are pros and cons to signing early or late. So if you sign earlier, sometimes that can make you eligible to start selecting housing, which can be a big deal for a musician because sometimes there are dorms that are closer to the practice room or the music school, and sometimes there are dormitories and campus housing that have actual music practice facilities within them. They'll have like a sound isolated practice room in the basement, right? Or they'll have like a piano room in the basement for you to practice oral skills stuff with. So having access to those is a good thing if you can make an earlier decision. If you wait longer though, sometimes you have the opportunity to access maybe financial aid that other students have declined. So maybe they turned your top choice school down to go to another school and that freed up a little bit of scholarship money, right? I'm not going to say that's a good idea or a bad idea, but sometimes that can happen. And so there are pros and cons to going early or late, depending on your particular situation. Once you get that letter, though, make sure you're paying attention to the conditions of both your acceptance letter and your scholarship money. Most of them come with GPA requirements, both for your music and your general courses. So it might say something like you have to maintain at least a 2.5 in your general education classes, and you have to maintain at least a 3.2 in your music classes. So that means you can't fail Music Theory 1 your first semester as a freshman, or you lose scholarship money, right? So pay attention to those and make sure you understand how that impacts your college career. There'll also be sort of enrollment necessities. You may have to, almost certainly you'll have to be a full-time student, which is 12 credit hours to maintain any type of scholarship. But you may also have prerogatives attached to that, like you have to take always 6 hours towards your music studies or something, right? Just make sure you understand all of those things. And your advisor, once you get to campus, will help you. It'll help hold your feet to the fire on that, but it's good to know that going in because you're not always going to have an advisor. Usually after your first or second year, you're sort of allowed to select your classes mostly on your own. So you want to know sort of what requirements are in place. And then a lot of contracts talk about satisfactory progress towards your degree. And that's basically saying if you're failing or withdrawing or retaking classes and it's not dropping below the GPA requirement, but you've taken music history 2-3 times, then you might need to have a conversation or your degree progress might actually be in jeopardy, right? So that's sort of an out for the department if they see like you're really struggling or failing with something. Just know that that's always there. So if you have issues with attendance, that can affect both your enrollment and also your financial aid. Now, let's say you have signed everything and you're ready to go. This is just real quick, but the summer before you go off to college, you're going to have to do a couple of things. You'll have an orientation session, a campus-wide orientation session. You'll have to do a bunch of rah-rah cheer stuff. And then you'll also be able to go to your college or department and be advised about your first semester classes, registering for them. You might have to do piano class placement and things like that. You might have to meet with professors in some capacity. It's all a good thing. Being on campus, sort of having some friends at your orientation session, it's always helpful because when you get to campus in the fall, you already have a couple of people to eat lunch with. It's kind of nice. So in the summer, make sure you sign up for whatever orientation session you need to, advising, registration. Check out your degree plan. And this is, I think it's a good idea just to know what your next 4 years will look like. The classes you're required to take, the year or semester that generally gets taken. You can kind of take classes a little bit in whatever order you want, but because you're getting a music degree, this is a little different than some other degrees. So if you get, let's say I keep coming back to accounting. Sorry if there are any accountants on the Zoom, but if you get an accounting degree, you probably have to take some math and some sort of general like undergraduate courses as well as your gen eds. But there's no specific accounting stuff, or not very much specific accounting stuff in the first year or two of classes. But as a musician, you're going to be taking, at least half your classes are going to be music classes for your entire time there. So you have a little bit less flexibility as far as what you can take when, and you should be aware of that. You're always going to be enrolled in Theory 1 and Piano 1 and Aural Skills 1. If it's a public university like a NASM accredited school, you're usually going to be in some type of freshman English seminar. You're going to have to be in lessons. You'll almost always have to be in a large ensemble and a chamber music ensemble. And then you have to take like math on top of that. So just know what your semesters are going to look like, right? And then you also want to start looking at the recommended equipment list, both on the percussion studio website and also if there's any recommended equipment from the university as a whole. The university as a whole will probably say it's a good idea to get a laptop or some type of computer. Yeah, they can sort of advise you on that. And then for percussion, we don't, as a high school percussionist, you're not required to own a ton of gear. But you should plan to start purchasing a lot of that stuff either the summer before or in your first couple of semesters at school. And that includes a bunch of sticks and mallets, probably a concert snare drum if you don't already own one. Some schools start recommending that you have like black towels of your own, accessory instruments, bass drum beaters, things like that. It's not all required, and you can accumulate it over time, but that first semester, you're probably going to want to have some stuff. But don't just buy anything. Most colleges are good about either having recommended equipment listed on their website, or you can talk to the professor about what they prefer for you to buy. And they may just say, hey, wait till you get here in the fall, and do that. It's my philosophy, personally, that you should never buy sort of educational quality equipment if you're going to college for music. And that is more expensive. So I think you should buy the right thing the first time, and that may mean waiting, or it may mean finding a list that the professors put together to help you find the right stuff, right? And then you want to have a serious conversation with whoever about the cost of gear and sheet music for the entirety of your degree, because a concert snare drum can cost $600 or $700. It's generally a good idea to set aside a couple $100 for sticks and mallets and sheet music every semester. Some schools will offer large sheet music libraries, which you are of course welcome to take advantage of. But part of being in college is also about accumulating things for your own collection and your own library that you'll then use to perform and teach with. So if you always rely on the college's library to create your own sheet music library, it's going to be difficult for you to accumulate a repertoire that you can perform once you get out of college. So it's an investment in yourself, and it's a difficult investment for a lot of people, but it's worth it. And then accessories, we talked about like towels, triangle clips, things like that, tuners. And then activity fees. I think it's always important to do summer festivals or travel study or DCI. And some of those can be funded through donors, or sometimes you can do crowdsourced funding for some of those things. But it's just important to like talk about those costs up front and know what you're getting into, because they're an important part of your education, even though they're not during your fall or spring semester. I would say that doing a summer festival or doing DCI are going to be one of the important parts of your education as a 18 through 20 something year old. So, and the last thing I'll say about this summer is just make sure you find time to remember what you like about music and keep coming back to it, because once you get to campus, you're going to kind of be thrown to the wolves a little bit, or at least thrown in the deep end of the pool and sort of expected to survive. It's very difficult. Music school is hard, and someone told me that music school should be hard if you want to do it right. Not that like everything you do needs to be the most difficult thing you do, but it's really important that you are applying yourself very hard from the beginning and try and squeeze all the juice out of it that you can. So try and create some space in the summer before and during your degree to remember what you're doing and just listen to music for enjoyment, because it's a lot of work and you don't want to lose that, because that's why you're getting into what you're getting into. So, all right. So that's sort of the end of my little spiel. So I do want to sort of open things up here to the panel. If we have any questions, if we have here, just a second. Yeah, if we have any questions for the panel from anybody. So we have a lot of great people here. We've got Professor Pablo Rieppi from Oberlin. It's a really great conservatory, helps run Juilliard pre-college. Dr. Todd Meehan at Baylor, really a great university. And then I have in Josh Torres also, who runs what I think is sort of one of the premier high school percussion programs in the country. BOA, WGI finalists, just really great program. So let's see if we can field a few questions and see if anybody wants to jump in. As always, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat.
Yeah, down at the bottom, guys, for all you who are attending, now that we're in the Q&A, first of all, Dr. Brady Spitz, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone. And in the Q&A, guys, there is a button down there that you can push, and we will be able to see all of your questions so that we can get this conversation started. The first thing that came through in the chat here was just more of a comment. They said, it's always good to compare percussion investment with others like string players and woodwind players that have yearly costs that are far more than a percussionist. So maybe that could sort of get this conversation started just a little bit about continuing on that conversation of some things you can expect to get in your first year and the comparison between that and other instruments.
Yeah, I'm a little curious for at least Mr. Rieppi and Dr. Meehan, what your expectations are for your students as far as investing in themselves for the duration of their degree.
I mean, first of all, Brady, great presentation, and it's nice to be here with you guys. I think, well, for both the schools, I actually set up a Steve Weiss page with links to everything that I require from them. So not that I expect everybody to use Steve Weiss exclusively, but it just makes it easier to click and just see where all the stuff is. So that makes it a little more convenient. In terms of like what should be required, I guess my teaching philosophy is that strong foundations on all the instruments are important, and that includes some of the complementary percussion as well. I don't see why you would want to start playing cymbals your last year, because it takes like a long time to kind of master those things. So not that you should go buy cymbals, but for example, I think a snare drum is a must-have. If you can get your hands on something that needs a little work, or a used instrument that you can fix up, that's a good concert snare drum, not like a drum set snare drum, then fine. By the way, Steve Weiss, I think, is having a sale on snare drums at the moment, in case anybody's looking for those. But I think that's an important one, a diverse set of mallets, not just for your lessons, but for example, at Oberlin, they do a ton of ensemble playing, from like sinfonietta type, contemporary music, to regular orchestra, to percussion ensemble. That's a lot of different flavors that you need there. And as I always tell students, it's a perpetual list that's gonna, I mean, I still buy mallets all the time, and I've been at this for over 30 years. So it's something that you need to, that's always gonna grow. But I think a basic set of complementary percussion, like a triangle tambourine, a snare drum. Obviously, you don't have to bring a marimba or timpanis. Those big items are provided by your school. But then a nice set of mallets. If you're playing timpani for undergrad, you should have a very articulate mallet, something just under that, a general mallet, a roller, and something maybe between the roller and the general. I think having a nice diverse set for most performance schools, one of the things, or actually, I should say most programs in general, one of the first things you do when you arrive on campus, to your point, Brady, about jumping the deep end, one of the first things you're going to do is a placement audition for one of the ensembles. And typically that requires a Glock, xylo, timpani, snare drum, some triangle, some tambourine, maybe some cymbal, some bass drum. Basically, you want to get a feel for what the person's going to sound like in the ensemble. So I have a lot of my high school students actually buy triangle, tambourine, a snare drum if they can. I feel like it's never too early to start on some of those things. So that and a basic set of mallets for all the instruments, I think, is really, really important for your first day of school.
And I'll say also that I think when you buy something like that, you're automatically invested in trying to make it sound good. So if you spend $150 on a tambourine, you're probably going to try and sound good on tambourine more than if you were just borrowing school instruments.
Absolutely. And now some of the new ones that came out are like $350. So $150 for a tambourine has become actually reasonable.
Get some of those Luft instruments.
All right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I'll chime in. A lot of this just, maybe somewhat redundant, but I think sometimes hearing these redundancies is important because you can see how most programs probably handle a lot of this stuff in a very similar way. Inevitably, I think the acquisition of gear is an ongoing thing, especially when you're a student. And while we do have this expectation that everyone's going to have most of the basic bases covered upon arrival, in fact, a lot of the lessons that I've taught here in the beginning of the semester have been specifically about this. So I just got the xylophone part for wind ensemble or symphonic band. What mallet do you think I should get for this? We actually have a mallet library, school-owned mallet library that students can use to try certain things out. By no means does it cover everything, but at least gives them an idea. But the hope there is that, if they have this big xylophone part that they're working on for 3.5 weeks in preparation for a concert, that as part of that, they're going to acquire the appropriate implement by say the middle of that process. And the same could be said for any of the other things that were mentioned. I just did a studio class today recapping our large ensemble audition process, and we specifically talked about people's tambourine sounds and how consistently good or better the tambourine sounds were for people that were playing their own instrument, that had already invested in that purchase, as opposed to those who just relied on the school-owned instrument. Fine instrument, but in our case, a rather old Grover with a head that's seen better days, and what a difference that is between the two. So some of this will sort of be forced upon the students, I think, as they have experiences really from one week to the next, with the hope that over the course, certainly of the 4 years, but even over perhaps the first 2 years, that you're going to build up enough of a gear, mallet, music inventory to really be able to do most of what you need to do.
Hey Brady, can I? I know we got into a gear talk right away, but do you mind if I just mention a couple of things that have to do with your presentation? Please. I mean, it was fantastic. I just wanted to mention a couple of things because I know that I want to stress a couple of things you mentioned, and then to mention a couple of things I think might be useful for students. You mentioned making a binder with all of your materials. I couldn't agree with that more. I have them do something like this with their coil bind. They have to make 4 of them, 1 for themselves and 3 for all the auditions they're going to take, so that they have nice presentations. Don't be shy about calling those back when you leave the room. Nobody wants to stack this high of music when at the end of the day, so they're glad to hand it back to you. But in the meantime, you've made yourself look very professional, and in the course of preparing for these auditions, you've had nice materials to give to people that are listening to you, and you have yourself just one basically packet you can stuff in your backpack and review the music and stuff like that. Another tip is when you walk in the room, I think, Brady, what you said is excellent. You definitely want to smile. You definitely want to talk. There's nothing worse than somebody coming in, they don't say a word, they look at the ground, and then you're wondering how you're going to spend the next 4 years with this person. Remember that we don't expect perfection at all. I mean, you should get rid of that word completely. You should just play your best. And what you said about choosing repertoire that's just beneath your level so that it sounds very musical and in your hands is an excellent, excellent, excellent point. What I wanted to add to that is when you walk in the room, and by the way, make sure you set up all your mallets first. You don't want to be like, making all this noise and ruffling through your stuff between pieces. Take the chance, after you've said hello and you're smiling, as you're pulling the mallets out, start breathing. I'm not kidding. So many students start this shallow breathing process. By the time they get to snare drum, they're shaking like, and they can't control their shakes. People ask, how do you control your nerves? How do you prepare for auditions? Well, preparing mentally over the course of the preceding months is extremely important, but start with this. In your practice room tomorrow, breathe 3 extremely deep breaths before you play your first note. When you take your next break, do that again. Do that about 4 times a day. It'll make a huge difference. You'll see how your body changes when you play. Also, don't forget to do that as you're setting up your mallets and putting your music out. Nobody can hear you. Nobody will know, but you will feel much better. Your muscles will start to relax. Your brain will start to oxygenate, which means your focus will be a lot more in tune. And believe me, you will play 20 to 30% better than if you don't do that. So do not forget to breathe, everybody. It's extremely important.
I want to jump in quickly to read a question that we just had here. It says, hello, my name is Albert Lau Pak Ho. I current final year Bachelor of Art in Music student in Hong Kong. May I ask about the arrangement of international student applications for 2021 to 2022? And he's asking, are universities still preferring pre-screening and Zooming auditions versus the live audition? Thank you very much. So maybe we can shoot that one down to Dr. Todd Meehan.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Whereas last year, of course, everything was via Zoom or some sort of virtual audition and interview. This year, at least at Baylor, we are going mainly live auditions, but still leaving the option of the virtual audition, especially in cases like this for international students. And that's many times the case, whether we are in a pandemic or not, that certain concessions are made. I think everybody would probably say that they prefer to experience the audition in person, get to actually meet the person in person. But the reality is there's sometimes obstacles to that, and traveling from far, far away is one of those things. So I think you'll still find many programs, regardless of what perhaps they're might be listed on the website. I think you'll still find a great deal of flexibility as we are still living in an incredibly fluid existence right now. I can at least tell you in Texas, the place is burning to the ground. So probably anything that we say is planned at this point may very well change here in the next couple of weeks. But as Brady said too, probably the most important thing to do is reach out to the professor at whatever university conservatory that you're looking at, and just ask that question directly. Hey, would I be able to do this via Zoom or virtually, given the circumstances?
And such good advice there. And I want to make sure we get advice from Mr. Josh Torres as well, because we haven't heard from him yet. And the question that I had for him, myself going also through Texas as a high school student, I was very lucky to have a director like you, Josh, and who was someone who was very dedicated, who was really into the percussion scene, and that was very helpful in terms of just your overall approach to getting ready for these auditions. These conversations that we're having right now, these were things that were in my ear before I went to apply. And so my question for Josh is are there things that you have seen from your students who go on to pursue successful careers in music? Are there things that you notice they start doing, maybe even their freshman, their sophomore year, that are indicators this person's going to have successful auditions, they're going to have a successful career in music? Maybe some behavioral things or practice habits or stuff like this.
Sure. Yeah. Now, first of all, obviously, there's a bubble in Texas that is very hard to attain in the rest of the country and or world, which I can certainly appreciate as a former student at North Texas and spending a couple of years teaching down in Texas. But the one thing I will say is that like lessons are just clearly like invaluable. And I've seen students that are high school students try to go the route of like, oh, I'm not going to do private lessons. That's not as much of a thing in Texas. In Texas, there's definitely just an incredible private lesson scene. And throughout the rest of the country, that's not really a term like private lesson scene. It's more like, where do I find a private teacher? So that would be the first thing I would just recommend. Obvious. I know that seems so obvious to everyone probably that's on this webinar. However, as a person who's lived in other parts of the country, it's not. I went to a really great like Bands of America Grand National Champion finalist high school in Chicago, and I had great teachers and great advice. But it was hard for me to find a private lesson teacher. And I remember when I was a senior, I had looked into some getting back into private lessons because my teacher had moved away. And, I was kind of quoted a rate from like a college professor, and it was just my family, like we couldn't swing that, and so I had to go elsewhere to find like a grad student who could kind of help me through that process. And so, while I know for many people on here, that's yeah, check, I'm doing that. If you're not, like, it's just you need somebody to bounce these things off of. And then, to further follow up, I would say that, to me, the students that were successful, they're constantly learning etudes and, smaller bits and pieces. It's not always like, this is the 15, I'm going to work up marimba spiritual as a sophomore in high school, and that's all I'm going to do my sophomore year. Those kids tend to run into issues because they've skipped too many steps along the way. So I would say trying to find that, like, go buy this etude book and work out of it, and then have your one piece that you're kind of working on throughout the year, but be doing the little etudes along the way. I think that would probably be my biggest piece of advice to a high school senior. Start working through etude books.
Yeah, it's really great advice. And how about from the rest of the panel, what you guys have noticed, because obviously, you're teaching at the collegiate level, but I'm sure you also work with students who are actively in high school and you see them. And I know, Pablo, you've done a ton of work with the pre-college. So same question, like what are some successful habits that you see people forming earlier on that maybe some of our people in the webinar here could adapt into their musical journey?
I mean, it's funny, like I'll have students ask me, do you think I'll be able to do this? Do you think I'll be able to make it? Do you think I'll be able to get into this college? And my answer is, and I'm not trying to be condescending or sarcastic, my answer is usually, yeah, anybody can get in. It's just that who's going to do the work to get in? And there's a big difference there, because I think if you don't understand those two phrases and how different they are, then you probably don't have the mindset that's going to get you where you want to go. And that also is changeable. I mean, all this stuff is doable. I've seen students that I thought, oh my gosh, what is this person going to do? You know, and they worked so hard that they got into an amazing program, or they got into an orchestra, or something else that seemed really out of reach. So I never ever answer that question by saying, no, I don't think you can do it. I always answer the question, you can do it, but will you do it? And so what I've seen, to answer your question, Josh, the difference I've seen between students that are very successful, either an audition or a festival or what have you, and students that don't quite reach the goals that they desired, is very simple. The people that succeed have a plan and they stick to it every day. They make a baby step every day, and they are unrelenting. I mean, it's a baby step, but it's never a step backwards. And they have a great plan. They keep a practice log. They use deliberate practice skills. They, really dissect their practicing their plan. They don't practice necessarily more hours than the other person, but they're extremely smart about how they practice. And that, 4 years later, makes a gigantic difference between, reaching your goal and not reaching your goal. So to me, that's one of the more fundamentals. And implementing a plan is not as easy as you might think. To keep a practice log every single day, and to follow it, and to analyze what you're doing, to record yourself, all this stuff. They're all like little steps you should perform every day. The person who actually does them is the person who's successful.
Yep. And not that this is a promotional webinar, but there does so happen to be this thing called the Liquidrum Practice Journal, just saying, which is very, very helpful for this sort of thing. I couldn't agree more, and I do that a lot in my practice. Maybe we can talk a little bit about, we touched on the things to do actually on the audition day. I mean, I know when I was at this stage, I was very concerned with how to execute just the audition, and especially at really performance-based schools. It's very important. A lot of what you're doing, like, these people might have never met you before. You need to come in and execute the audition. And of course they read essays, and I know you guys are doing everything that you should to look at a well-rounded view, but I think sometimes in certain ways you guys are better about that. You guys are better people, this group of panel. But some teachers are extremely focused on people who execute a really good performance. So maybe we can talk some more of these tips about performance that you can do in your audition, like you were mentioning, Pablo, like the breathing. I mean, that's a really amazing tip. I've actually never thought of that, like focus on breathing while you're setting up mallets. That's such a good mental cue. Maybe anyone who wants to jump in, some other tips like this for audition day and how to have a successful audition in the room.
Yeah, I can say a little something here. At least as far as preparing for being in the room, one of the things that you can do is find a great teacher and trying to develop some proficiency on timpani. Because it's been my experience that entering college freshmen usually are deficient the most in timpani playing. And perhaps Josh can speak to this better than I can, but one of the most difficult things for a public school teacher or a private school teacher, whatever, a secondary school teacher, to facilitate is the ability for their students to have access to that piece of equipment. And so if snare drum playing is good and keyboard playing, at least two mallet playing is good, it's been my experience that timpani playing is the weakest leg of the three. And so one of the things you can do to put yourself on great footing is not be not necessarily as deficient, but having enough experience on timpani through your repertoire and with a private teacher so that you're not nervous about one of those sort of three pillars of your audition experience. And then of course, breathing, taking time even before you play and in between things. The breathing thing, that Pablo mentioned, it sort of affects your central nervous system. But one of the things you don't realize in a solo performance, and let's face it, if you have not been a solo recitalist as a high schooler, you probably haven't had a lot of experience with this, but your perception of time as the person playing is way different than the perception of time from the person watching you. So if you think you're taking 5 minutes in between pieces and, oh God, the panel hates me for taking this long to get my mallets ready, it's probably been about 25 seconds. So you're allowed to take time between pieces and take a breath and like get up to your instrument, get your hands out, go. Like I think you would be amazed if we've mentioned the phrase deliberate practice, but one of the things about deliberate practice is creating mock performance environments for yourself. So if you get all of your audition repertoire together, can you play it for all your friends and family, or can you sit a band director down and play your entire audition experience for them? By the way, I'd recommend doing at least 10 of those before you go to an audition. Just find 10 groups of people to play all your audition material for, and then record yourself and listen back, and you're going to think you took so long to get the timpani tuned. And on the recording, you're going to see it's, in terms of minutes and seconds, it's not nearly as much as you think it was. And then you'll hear maybe a lot of the things that you think are important that you're blowing in your performance sound just fine on the recording. And so you can shift your priorities to other things. This is all part of a process called deliberate practice. And it's sort of become popular, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, I would say. But if you want a great book on this, it's Peak by Erickson. Jason Haheim also does a really great clinic on this. But it's just about recording yourself and how to make everything you do more efficient, so the progress you go through is really directed. And Pablo is correct. It's following that plan is very difficult, because recording yourself and thinking of creative solutions to these problems is maybe a little more painful than just doing 10 reps of the same etude, but it's totally worth it. Totally worth it. And the person that does that is going to get where they want to go.
Yeah, Brady, just to answer your timpani kind of question. I mean, I think if you're a high school student, just think about all the time that you've had group instruction on a snare drum. Think about all the time you've had group instruction on a mallet instrument. And now think about all the times you've had group timpani playing, right? It's probably significantly less because even at a school like ours, where we have a ton of equipment, we've got like 2 sets of timpani. So pretty much we can sort of do group timpani playing if everybody's playing on 1 drum or 2, or it's like an ABC situation. So, I mean, that right there should tell you a lot about the individual preparation that you need to put in to get your timpani playing up to par. I think from the high school educator perspective, because I'll admit too, like that my students are the worst at timpani out of those 3 things that you said. And I think a big part of it is they have all these specific things that they know that they need to do on snare drum uniquely from any other instrument. They know all these things that they have to do on marimba or mallets from unique from any instrument. But then timpani, they just try to put this generic, it's somewhere in between marimba and snare drum. So I think that like really diving into that and making sure that you're putting it on equal footing with the other 2 instruments is going to be, extremely helpful to your preparation.
Yeah, I'll add this, and this is, I think, challenging for students coming out of high school, simply because the experience that a lot of students have had is perhaps doesn't necessarily lend itself to this. But I know for me, in the 12 to 15 minutes that I have listening to an audition, as much as I can feel that this is sort of a recital more than an audition, I'm much more happy if I can get to that headspace, and I'll unpack that just a little bit. Obviously, in Texas, where I am, and many people on this panel, of course, know this very well. The region and all-state machine that exists here, which has of course, incredible upside and does some wonderful things in terms of development and produces some wonderful players. My first interaction, Josh, with you many years ago was at the Baylor Band and Orchestra Camp, which is, part of this is, we offer scholarships for that camp for people who have been successful in the all-state process. That process, of course, has some downsides to it as well. And one of those downsides can be that that is our perception of what it means to play solo. And this is what playing solo or as a soloist is, or this is what all auditions are like. Because of course, up to that point, this is largely what we have done. So two things that you can take away from that. One, perhaps if you are in a state that really leans heavily towards that, choosing repertoire that perhaps is not on that list, that may be related to it, but not specifically that. So that you can separate yourself a little bit from those who are probably all playing a lot of that repertoire. And two, finding a way to transition that very sort of siloed way of playing those specific etudes into something that perhaps has some sort of greater narrative arc when you're putting it all together. Now, that's tough to do because you didn't choose those pieces. If you're playing the all-state music, somebody else chose them. You're just playing them because they're assigned. But, what's the best flow? If I get to choose order, what's the best flow for this? How do I build drama by starting with this piece and ending with this piece? Anything that you can do to perhaps extract that and turn it into something that, I don't know, for me, maybe it's a bad term, but a little bit more engaging for your listener being the professor listening to it, perhaps a more artistic presentation, just something that shows that extra layer of thought, attention to detail, that this is something more than just, can I rip this etude and hit all of the notes correctly? You probably can. You probably wouldn't be auditioning at the schools you're auditioning out if you couldn't. So what else is there beyond that?
Such good points. Everything on the money, guys. I wish I had heard some of these things before my auditions. Now we're getting into some uncharted territory here. It's awesome.
I will also add that at least as far as the timpani portion of like the Texas all-state etudes, not to get too deep into that, but a lot of times these all-state etudes tend to reward faster notes and virtuosic, almost like they're like tenor solos, and your sense of intonation and touch are not nearly valued. But in a college audition with an instructor that knows what they're doing, your ability to tune and play simple etudes with a good characteristic sound is so much more important than playing. Usually when I would recommend high school students when I was still teaching in Texas, I would blow off the all-state timpani etude and have them play a Hochreiner etude or something simple where they're forced to tune simple intervals by ear and demonstrate that ability with a good characteristic sound. And that's so much more impressive at the college level than playing, the rocket fuel that they pour down the high school students' throat, I think.
Yeah, we do have one question. I want to make sure that we get to the question. Sorry to interrupt you, Pablo. How about I ask this question and then Pablo, you can follow up on both of them. The question is, hello, this is from Harrison Murphy. Hello, I am a senior this year in high school from Dallas area, figuring out how my audition process will work this year. How do I determine what schools to audition at live if I'm applying to a few out of state? It isn't financially ideal to fly all over the country, and there are only so many audition dates. Would taking a virtual audition put me at a disadvantage for admission? And thanks, this has been super helpful so far. So to Pablo.
I think if at all possible, you should do the live audition. People are just dying to get back live. And while I think I've learned a lot from Zoom, to be honest, and I'm going to take some of the things that I've learned while we've been remote and actually apply them when we go back live. But, I don't know if the panel agrees with me, but it's funny. A student walks into an audition, and within, I would say, 1 minute of their first piece, you have a pretty good idea of how it's going. Of course, you listen to the whole audition, but you have a good idea because of the way they walked in, what they might say, their composure, the way they start the piece. You have a really good idea right from the beginning. So good and bad. So I think being live, if you can, is really important. However, the cool thing about having Zoom is a lot of teachers right now are willing to meet with you via Zoom. Like if you want to take a sample lesson, or if you want to talk to the person. I know I certainly welcomed. I've done it a bunch this year. So I would recommend reaching out, make a list of like, narrow it down to maybe 8 schools or something, or 6, whatever, and then reach out to those instructors. My guess is all, if not most of, or most, if not all of them, will respond in a very positive way and will want to meet with you. So then you can determine, if you like the instructor, and do some research on the school, as Brady really excellently illustrated earlier. And I would say also, if you're going in to be a performer, for me, there were 2 things that I really looked at: the teacher, who the teacher is going to be, and I mean the teacher, not studying with an assistant or something like that, and then the facilities. If you're going to be a performer, you want a great practice room, plenty of instruments, and a great teacher. And there are other things that Brady mentioned that are really important, but those are 2 giant ones. I just want to say, going back earlier to a couple of things, is that this year with COVID, a lot of the students didn't have timpani at home, and there was a lot of success with taking a tape measure 24 inches apart and putting the 2 drum pads right where the beating spots are, basically on 2 drums, and then making sure that you're with a teacher so he or she can properly sort of evaluate your stroke, things like that. And then, to tell you the truth, having the pads and not the timpani around sometimes leaves a lot more responsibility to your imagination, which I think really is lacking, generally speaking, in young timpani players. They don't know what kind of sound they want to make, so it's really hard to make the hands do that. And it's really fundamental for all instruments, but in particular timpani, cymbals, cymbals especially, because you can't really practice cymbals 4 hours a day, or else you end up with a lifelong tendonitis. But imagining what the sound you want to make is actually an excellent first step. So practicing timpani with the drum pads, as long as, again, you have good instruction and your teacher's like being careful about how you're doing your strokes, and you're not, you're very careful about that, but actually using your imagination to pretend they're timpani is really helpful. And the proof recently, as we've gone back to in-person teaching, a lot of these students that were for over a year doing it on drum pads, when they came back, I gotta say, I've actually noticed some improvement in their timpani playing, rather than having it regress. So I would say that's a very useful thing to do if you don't have timpani around.
Yeah, and I guess maybe tying those questions together, I think there are ways to make Zoom a successful experience. So perhaps to answer the student's question, maybe making a list and like a priority of like, what are your like what like high school guidance counselors do, like what are your reach schools, what are your safe schools, what are your do that type of thing, and then make a flight plan based on trying to hit up some of your some of the schools you really want to go to, making it a priority to be there live, and maybe zooming into something that's like maybe a safety school. I don't want to denigrate any particular program, but that might be a good way to prioritize your travel plans, especially if COVID makes airline travel any worse. But then once you get into the Zoom experience, there are ways to make it good. And when I was taking auditions, not just like school auditions, but professional auditions, it was always like, be like undeniable, right? That was sort of like the phrase. So you want your musicality, your musicianship to be present even over Zoom. And we really would prefer that you be there live, but I think we all understand that that's not a possibility in every situation. And so if you can find a way to be just undeniable and convincing within a digital environment, I don't know that you'll be penalized heavier or too heavily for that, especially if like who you are as a musician comes through the screen. If you have a microphone and a camera that are able to pick up the nuances of your playing. Like for instance, let's say you're a monster snare drummer, but you're playing with a laptop microphone. The clarity of your soft snare drum playing and peeking out that microphone on your Zoom is going to be a bad thing. So you want to be able to showcase that musicianship. You want to be able to have technology that allows all of your phrasing to come through on a mallet instrument, or your tone color to come through on timpani. So having technology that allows you to do that and making your presentation over this platform still undeniable can work. It's not the most ideal situation, but if you put some thought into those elements of things, I think there's still a way to be successful on that platform.
And jumping in there, yeah, I'll send it right down to you, Josh, because I was gonna I actually wanted to ask you, you know, part of this, what a little bit what you guys are hinting at now, I feel like is some mock auditions, like some runs of the actual day. And I'm wondering, Josh specifically, you know, have you seen your students there before their auditions? Is it common for them to do mock auditions at that stage? And if they haven't yet, maybe we could talk about the benefits a little bit of doing them, because I know for me that was by far the thing that really, like, whoa, okay, here I did my mock audition. Here are the things that still are not even close, and here are the things I could probably, you know, spend less time practicing on because they're going really well. I feel really confident. So we're talking about organizing practice, and yeah, I'm curious to hear from you, Josh, about your students and mock auditions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge thing, and you know, again, Indianapolis is a lot like a Dallas Fort Worth or Houston and Austin and all that, where there's a lot of great programs within an area, a lot of great teachers within an area. So kind of one of the things I try to recommend to some of my students sometimes is like, hey, why don't you try to reach out to the person over at Carmel High School, or reach out to the person at whatever, and see if you can play for them as well. Obviously, it'd be great if you can get, nowadays with the Zoom thing, it's a little bit easier to have access to the college professors. But at the same time, like, you don't always want to do that in a mock audition sense. So just sometimes playing for, obviously, other peers, sometimes playing for other instructors, other private teachers, maybe even, I know, like, when I was in high school, I had a relationship with a couple of college professors where they knew I wasn't going to go to their college or university, but I could still reach out to them and play for them. You know, I either met them at like summer camps, or, you know, various all-state groups and things like that. So obviously, it's just such a huge resource. I did want to just touch on one thing, and then I'll hand it right back over to someone else to handle. But in terms of the question, you know, somebody earlier wrote like the investment, and I just think that, man, you owe it to yourself at this stage of your game. I know for myself, and I'm sure everybody else in this Zoom panel would agree, that like, I was totally shaped by my undergraduate experience. Those 4 years, like, I still have so many contacts. I've gotten so many gigs. I've gotten, you know, so many friends through that. And, you know, a lot like Pablo said, where you walk in that first minute and they can tell a lot about you. There's a lot that you can tell about that visit in that audition experience. So, like, I do think it is an incredible investment, and I know it might be tough to swing, but it is totally worth it, just to make sure that you feel like you've got the right place.
And something that Josh was saying too, reaching out to other people. If you're a high school student, you probably don't know this, but even seasoned professionals decades into their jobs still reach out to colleagues to play for them if they're doing something important. It's, I mean, big time orchestra auditions, huge solo and chamber opportunities. Usually they're going to play for at least a few of their colleagues, even travel to play for their colleagues. So, like, if, you know, someone who's in their 40s or their 50s is still going to reach out to colleagues and play a mock audition for them, I think it's probably something that you can do too.
I want to touch on something that Todd said earlier that I don't think gets enough attention when you're worried about notes and rhythms and nerves and all kinds of stuff. But I think it's critical from the beginning of the process to really understand the style of the piece and whatever groove that piece has. I think it's critical to attach a meaning to the piece. Let's say somebody earlier mentioned, this repertoire, I don't resonate with it, but it's required for a certain thing. Your job, and certainly in the professional world, it's this way. Your job is to find the meaning for you, so you can give it the best performance ever. And the reason I want to touch on style and groove is because sometimes students work on the accuracy or the rhythm or some technical thing, and then they see the phrasing or the style as a cherry on top, when in fact it's the piece, or it's what the music is about. And the other thing I want to mention about style and groove is that, in fact, a lot of the technical problems disappear once you start playing the music with the style and with the phrasing, because it changes the way you move on the instrument. It can make a line that's very vertical or very stiff actually a lot more linear and a lot looser and a lot more lyrical. And so then you've accomplished two things. You've solved a technical problem that really existed in your head. And you made it sound like a real piece of music, which is what we're all dying to hear. And one thing you should also keep in mind as students is that on the other side of the panel, the people listening, we want to have a good time. We want to enjoy your performance. We're not there to find the mistakes. I know that we talk about this a lot, but we're actually there to enjoy ourselves. We want nothing more than somebody to come in and just nail it, or to have a good time, or to smile, or to play a great phrase, whatever the case may be. And I want to say one more thing, and I'm just going to stop talking. But one of my teachers, actually Dan Druckmann, told me this quote one time that really stuck with me for the rest of my life. I was getting ready for an orchestra audition, a professional audition, and I had a pretty good run through for him, and I mentioned something about, well, I hope I nail it that day or something like that, and he said, I wouldn't really think about trying to play 100%. What I would try to do if I were you is be reasonable and expect to play 80% of your best. It's just that your 80% has to be better than everybody else's. Now, the prize in that statement is that you don't have to be perfect. Mistakes are okay as long as you have a beautiful sound. Your rhythm is nice, your time feels good, your phrasing, you're playing with style, you have a groove. If you make a couple of note mistakes or something goes wrong, I would love to know what everybody thinks on this panel, but for myself, I'm more interested in the other things. If somebody drops a note or plays a mistake, I don't really care, as long as they had a great personality and they're playing and they had a nice sound and they approached the audition with like positive energy and joy. Those things are a lot more important.
And I want to jump in because I see Josh actually has a question himself for the panel. So fire away, Josh.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So just like listening to all of you guys speak it really gets my brain going. So like, obviously as a high school teacher, I have students that come and they want to look at these schools and I think about their strengths and weaknesses, but I'm curious to you guys, because I know you guys prepare college students for graduate auditions, right? So there's sort of a parallel there. And I guess when it comes to a student like picking repertoire, I know that that's a lot of times like the kids are like, give me the answer. What do I play to get into this school? Or what does this person not want to hear or this person want to hear? So could you just talk a little bit about your process of like when a senior comes in and they want to audition and they come with a list of schools, what are you talking to them about to make sure like that they're set up well for their audition?
Well, I think we can actually tie those two things together, because the student's audition repertoire for grad school or for undergrad has to check a certain number of boxes, but they have to let their character and their personality shine through all of that. So the repertoire that they select in the schools, well, the repertoire that they select and the way that they play it needs to allow them to come through whatever they're doing. So a lot of times, at least for grad students, I think they end up tying their senior recital in some way to their grad school auditions, which is a good strategy. But you want to make sure that what they're doing ties into their personality enough where their inner musician can come through, just like Pablo was talking about. So like if you're coming into the room and you're super nervous and you're playing vertical and you're playing just the notes, you're not coming through, just your technique is coming through. And so if you can end up playing a little more fluid and lyrically by choosing a piece or repertoire that connects with you and that you can emote through, and then you can play beautiful phrases through, I think that's always going to be more successful. And so that's where I sort of try to guide the students to do. I usually don't give answers. I give like broad swaths of repertoire that they can then kind of pick, I mean, both undergraduate and graduate auditions have, like I said, boxes you have to check. For graduate auditions, you may have to play a piece of Bach and some contemporary marimba solo and a couple of snare drum solos, I like whatever, but like there's a difference between picking a really difficult Pratt etude and picking Tompkins, and there's a stylistic difference in that, and one of those things you may connect with more, and you want to do the thing that you connect with more. Like if you want to play a multi-percussion piece, you don't need to play Ray-Bons for like a multi-percussion audition piece if you really identify with something that's completely stylistically different, just because Ray-Bons tends to be on like the hot 100 of all grad school like rep sheets. You know what I mean? So that's usually where my conversation starts with both high school students and with students going into graduate schools, finding repertoire that they can connect with and make beautiful music through that shows who they are.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Brady said. And I think, this doubling up idea, I think, is inevitable and many times just smart. The hope is, if they've crafted a very interesting recital that's reflective of who they are as a musician, or is part of, what they see as the growth that they want to witness over their senior year, that whatever repertoire is chosen for that, or perhaps even for their junior year recital, that it is something that they really, really care deeply about, and that those things then, as they're put out into, as they have life maybe beyond the recital, say in an audition, that hopefully it carries all of that same weight. It carries all of that same that same care and craft. I think that is, it's where we have to draw that distinction, though. As soon as we put the label of audition on a thing, it's almost like it changes everything. It changes, maybe we're playing this vignale solo for our recital, and we think it's just the coolest thing ever, and we're getting into so much of the groove aspect of it, and then we say, oh, we're going to put this vignale solo on an audition. And our mind almost switches about how we have, okay, oh, do I have to play it differently now? Do I have to, perhaps do I need to play it safe? If I miss a note here, but, and I think that's an issue. I think we have to somehow continue to work towards something that doesn't, where the audition doesn't in some way cast some sort of shadow, and I'm not saying that this is true for everyone, but as soon as we say that word, sort of, I go back to my own experience with professional auditions, and I get a little tightness in my stomach and think, oh God, right, the audition. Well, I just want to play music, and I just want to love playing music, and I want my students to love playing music. And if it happens to be on an audition, or it happens to be on a recital, or it happens to be down at the local coffee shop, hopefully, while there are different parameters that go into those processes, hopefully it can all kind of carry the same spirit with it.
And I'll say also, it's way easier to not get nervous if you're focusing on music that you love, rather than trying to tick off boxes in an audition room. So if you have music that you love and you connect with, that will come through, even if you're only playing at 80% of your best, right?
Talking about repertoire, Josh, Josh Torres, you asked the question. I think it was last summer, no, the summer before, so 2020. I did a panel where I had a bunch of college teachers that were also orchestral players. So they were, some guys were pretty well known. And I was dying to ask actually the question you just asked, but it was very specific about timpani pieces. Because that Hockrainer 50 piece, it's a beautiful piece, but I've heard it almost 10,000 times, maybe 1 year. It's beautiful, and I love the Hockrainer books, and I use them, and I'm a huge fan. But it can't be that we're playing the same piece over and over again. So I asked the panel, so what do you think about, what pieces do you like to hear? I purposely asked, what pieces do you like to hear for auditions? And the response was what I hoped they would say, which is, it really doesn't matter what they play as long as they get a beautiful sound, it's in tune, and they're playing in time and making music. Because we want to see somebody who has the ability to play the instrument, not show us their favorite piece or our favorite piece. And by the way, a similar comment about timpani malice, which was also refreshing. But I think all of you have said the same thing. I'm just saying further evidence that many people feel the same way. As long as you're displaying what you can do on the instrument, and it really shows beautiful sound, beautiful. I mean, if you have a beautiful sound, if your time and rhythm on all the pieces is good, but on timpani you have a beautiful sound and great intonation, then you're probably in the top 5% of the auditions. And that's not an exaggeration. So think about that. It always comes down to these basics.
And I think it's really great for any high school student that's on here to hear this. I mean, obviously, I kind of like Pablo said, I'd kind of hoped that they would say that, because I know that I've had students that I've needed to convince, like, you do not need to play that hard of a piece. It's much more important that you play a piece that you can play really well and musically. And I've seen it time and time again where the student, tried to push them, tried to push their limits, and it didn't go well when they got nervous in the audition, and it didn't turn out the way they wanted to. And another student who played something that was much more in their wheelhouse, much easier, and it ended up much better in their favor. So there's not like a magic list that's going to get you in. It's much more about what they've said time and time again. Find something that you love that shows your personality. Like, thank you guys for saying that. I think that for the high school students, that's really important to hear.
And
I think the higher up you get in this activity, sorry, Josh, the higher up you get in this activity, in this discipline, for musicians of any sort of instrument or voice, the higher you get up in it and the more successful you become, the less it becomes about the craft of your instrument itself, and the more it becomes about musicianship as like a holistic endeavor. And so that means like playing with nice phrases and playing with a characteristic sound on whatever you're doing, and beautiful touch, and letting personality shine through. That's always going to be valued because it transcends not just the different percussion instruments, but percussion as a discipline unto itself. And, so I guess there's an argument for playing for string players and wind players and stuff if you're going to play for people before your audition, because your musicianship should be evident to everybody.
And I just want to make sure that we cover at least one last topic, unless we get some more Q&As. Everyone who's here, you can still feel free to shoot any Q&A that you want to down into the chat or the Q&A function there. But we haven't talked about double majoring at all. And I do feel like that's something I didn't really have an option to do. So depending on what school you go to, you might not even have this option really. And that was, my personal choice. I knew that going into it is what I wanted. But when I after I was done at conservatory, I went to Rice University, and that option was available for all of the undergrads. And all of a sudden I felt like I had sort of missed out. And I have also seen a number of like professional orchestra players who have degrees in multiple things, and it made me realize, oh, that's really actually possible. But maybe we could talk a little bit about the pros and cons of a double major, and how many, maybe also a percentage of how many of your students do that at school. Maybe down to Dr. Todd Meehan.
Sure. Yeah. So at Baylor specifically, there is not the option for a true double major. Our administrators will sometimes smirk and say, yes, you can do a double major, but it will take 8 years, because it's truly, you're actually doing two separate things without much overlap. So we don't encourage that. We do have a secondary performance major. So, and this too is where we kind of get into the weeds a little bit between degree and major. And as Brady was talking about earlier, how things are housed if a school of music is within a College of Arts and Sciences, and it's sort of the hierarchical aspects of the university. For us, a student can major in something else, let's say pre-health, or we were talking about accounting earlier, and can also do a secondary performance major in music. It's not a degree, it's not a music degree, but it is sort of functions like a certificate that strips away a lot of the academic side of music. So there's only, I think, theory 1, musicianship 1, maybe one music history course, private lessons through all 4 years, and some large ensemble participation. So it amounts to, I don't know, maybe 32 credits overall, but that can be attached to some other major.
And how about Dr. Brady Spitz? What is the situation there at University of Tennessee Martin? I mean, I know you're just getting started there recently, but I'm sure you can already speak to this.
Yeah, a lot of people take advantage of the BA program here if they want to do something that's sort of interdisciplinary. A lot of people do that. I have seen in the past in other college programs, people end up doing like a double major performance music education. And that's certainly possible because a lot of the coursework overlaps. And then when I was at Rice, of course, some of the undergrads did that, but almost all of them extended into 5 or 6 years to get the coursework done. So it ends up extending their degree a fair amount. There are pros to that. I mean, there are pros to double majoring, especially if you have passions in multiple things and you can kind of create a multidisciplinary existence in your career. But I will say that the downside of it is that you don't necessarily throw yourself as wholly into one thing. And with something like music, that could be really valuable, because if you're doing, like pre-engineering calculus homework for 6 hours a day instead of playing snare drum, you may run into problems down the road. And it should not be underestimated the amount of time you need to put into both fundamentals in your first couple of years in college, and then also how you sort of shape your repertoire as you get to the back half of your college career. So time constraints are a really big issue with double majoring in almost everything, and even music ed performance, because those techniques and methods classes really can cut into practice time and other elements of a performance-based degree, which can include things like formal analysis or any sort of historical analysis classes and things that inform your performance practice. So it exists, but it's difficult unless it's something you really feel passionate about.
And how about from Pablo?
Well, I'm just kind of getting going at Oberlin, but I am shocked to know that almost every percussionist, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3, are double or triple majors. I'm going to leave it there because I don't know how they do it. But it's a very common thing at Oberlin. Yeah, check back with me in a year.
And
but I agree with what Brady said, that my first year in undergrad, I went to a regular university, and I actually was going to double major in visual art and music. And after the first semester, I was like, no way, Jose, there's no way I can do this. And we had to take some, non-music electives there as well. Between that and just practicing every spare minute, I had to focus all my time on the music part.
And down to Josh, I mean, how do you navigate that conversation with some of your, rising seniors, rising juniors who are thinking about this? This idea that, okay, you're very, very talented in music, you can probably go on and do it, but things like COVID happen too. These questions happen in students' minds when they're thinking about, and also questions from parents like, are you really going to get this music degree? Are you going to be able to, provide for your family? These things, these questions come up. So how do you navigate these conversations with your students?
Yeah, I guess I look at it from 2 areas. When I was a senior in high school, I was in the all-state band, and Mallory Thompson from Northwestern University was the conductor. And she tackled this on the first or the last day. I don't remember what it was, but I just thought it was really insightful as a high school senior, because I'd never heard anyone put it that bluntly to me. She was basically like, if you want to be a performer, if you have nothing other than you want to perform, that's what you want to do, then follow that dream. Don't just go into ed as a backup in case you don't make it, because you're already putting yourself at a huge disadvantage in that world. By sort of already saying well, I want to do this just in case, and to me that really resonated with me. Now a lot of teachers say the opposite. They say don't get a performance degree, it's worthless, and I personally don't agree with that. I kind of a lot like what the other people have said is find the things you're passionate about, and I look at myself as a good example. I have 2 performance degrees, and I teach, and I'm a certified teacher, and that and it's not because I never really tried to make it in the performance world. As soon as I started teaching kind of part-time, I went, I really like doing this. And then eventually it worked out, and I got alternative certification. And then when it came time for a master's degree, I thought, well, I want to learn more about what I do every day as a percussion educator. I want to do that. So, I have multiple performance degrees, and I think that if you're highly motivated, you're going to make things happen for you. I've seen that time and time again, that the people who are highly motivated, whatever degree path they go through, they're going to just, push through until they find some success and break through. So I guess that's where I tend to talk to my students about, is that, you know, that kind of to your point about like, can you make a living doing this? It's like, I've seen many people make an incredible living doing this with performance degrees, with jazz studies degrees, with, you know, many varying degrees. So don't feel like you have to have this one narrow pathway.
Music ends up being what's called a portfolio career for a lot of people anyway. You're going to have some element of performance to what you do and some element of teaching to what you do. And the balance of that can be determined or rebalanced throughout your career. So it's not necessarily to your advantage to think of college like a vocational school, and more to think about it like training for what kind of music you want to make, and then allow your vocation to sort of find itself once you get to the end of your degree. As scary as that sounds, I do think that's important to think of. So.
And really, guys, I mean, for me, this has been so comprehensive. I know that some of us are in time zones here where it's getting a little bit later in the evening, so I don't want to hold anyone too long. But I do want to give everyone the opportunity to make sure that we cover everything that anyone wanted to say. So I would say for our panelists here, let's any sort of closing thoughts or some topics that we didn't get to. Let's make sure that we get to those now. Brady, did you have anything?
No, this has been absolutely great. I think we've covered most everything that we would want to cover. I would say for high school students, don't be intimidated by the pedigree of either the panel or the professors you're reaching out to. A lot of them want to bring you there. They want you to be successful. So just sort of proceed with the knowledge that these relationships are friendlier than you think they might be from outside the ivory tower.
And Pablo, any
well, I agree with that. You're in charge of your own success and your own destiny in the end. It's great to have wonderful parents. I'm a parent myself, and I do a lot for my kids, and I love it. And I'm a teacher, and I do a lot for my students. But in the end, each person has to make a decision and really, put something into action. So reach out to a teacher. I've never had a student come back to me and say they completely rejected me, they won't meet with me, or they refuse to respond to me. In fact, for all the pre-college students, I'm more than, this might be an option for some of you students out there too. I always reach out to the teacher that they want to, have a lesson with, and send an email just to introduce them. So that's another option for students. But yeah, definitely reach out. Definitely be brave. I would say the main advice is be fearless. Be brave. Put a plan to action every day, and don't be afraid to follow through. Don't be afraid to play for people. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need, and don't be afraid to go after it. A lot of times that's what stops a lot of people. Don't. You only have yourself to blame if you do that. So be brave. We're all out here smiling, ready to help you. So you have a ton of resources out there. Yeah, for sure. There's a ton of resources out there, so take advantage of them. Certainly, if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to help. And it was a pleasure to listening to everybody on the panel as well today.
To Dr. Meehan.
Yeah, likewise, first of all, thank all of you for including me in this, but it's just, so informative to listen to other perspectives, on similar things and how we're all kind of dealing with similar things. But I think the gist of this talk is how we're all, I think, motivated to help younger students in similar ways navigate this what can be a fairly complex process. This will probably be a little boring after Pablo's beautifully motivating words, but this is a little more nuts and bolts, and that is, so in addition to teaching, I have an administrative role. Has been serving as chair of our instrumental division for about the past 5 years. So in that role, I see a lot of the inner workings of the admissions process. I also advise 50 performance majors, instrumental performance majors, every single semester from freshman year to senior year. So the nuts and bolts of how a degree works and how all of this needs to sort of come together is something that I deal with every single day. On the admission side specifically, apply to university, conservatory, college, whatever you're applying to, as early as you can. Get all of your things in as early as you can. I'm not necessarily saying audition as early as you can, though you can if you want, but get the application in, get your test scores in. Money runs out. Even at universities that seem like they have a lot of money, money runs out. The earlier you can get your name into the system, the sooner that they can break things down and say, oh, yes, we definitely want this person. And the sooner that they can say, and we'd like to give you this academic scholarship of X amount of dollars. And you can get that solidly in place, even if that's months before you ever go and audition for the percussion studio. Please, please do that. Because I've had many, many talented students at the 11th hour come around in mid-March and say, oh, I want to audition. Have you applied to the university? No. Can I even apply at this point? Maybe. We got to pull some strings. I promise you, though, there's no more money left. So take care of those things, those logistical things, as early as possible. It'll set you up for success on that end. And then you can kind of shift gears and really, really focus on that audition and the music side of things.
Genius advice. And Mr. Torres, you'll have the final words here, and then I'll have some closing statement and pass it back to Brady to say goodbye to everyone. So to Mr. Torres.
Yeah, awesome. And again, to echo everyone's sentiments, thanks, Brady, for putting this together and for thinking of me. It's definitely a we're not worthy situation to be a part of you guys. But yeah, I think what Todd had just said, I totally agree with, because I've watched high school students go, I live in Indiana, and I've watched students go, I want to go to IU, and I go, it's November 26th, your pre-screen is due in 5 days, like, and then go, oh my God, right? So you can't get caught by surprise. Like, doing your research now is critical, because you might find that somebody has a pre-screen due December 1, and if you didn't know and you weren't ready for it, then you're in big trouble. So and then the last part is, like, when you finally get in, you're finally all good. You know, there are so many things that when I look back at my undergrad, and I know so many undergrads are like this, as soon as you get in, you're already thinking about, like, your way out, you know, and that next thing. And there's so many things that if I could go back and be in the African ensemble, or I played a little bit more in the steel band, or had done this or done that, like, I can never do those things now. Like, that ship has sailed. So really, while you're in that college experience, make sure you embrace your college or university for everything that you can get out of it, you know, playing in all the ensembles that you can and doing all the things that you can, because, you know, as soon as you're out of it, you lose that opportunity. So, you know, just soak it up while you're there. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Well, guys, it's just been an incredible talk with all of you, and truly a treasure trove of information. Thank you for letting the Percussion Conservatory host this event. I really appreciate you guys advancing percussion education for everyone. Being here and being a part of this is really helpful for everyone who wants to go through this, and I'm excited that more things like this are happening so that students have access to this type of information earlier and earlier, and people from all over the world, as we just saw Hong Kong and some people here from Malaysia. And I mean, it's amazing that you guys are reaching so many people through these new platforms. So again, thank you everyone for this talk, and I want to allow Brady, since Brady put together all of this and was the presenter and the organizer and the everything-er, I want to let him have the final words, and then we will call it a night. So over to Dr. Spitz.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I won't say too much. We're about 20 minutes over, so I know people probably want to get on with their evening, but yeah, thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks to Pablo and Todd and Josh. Just amazing insights on everything. Also, thanks, Josh, to you at the Percussion Conservatory. If students are still watching, the Percussion Conservatory, just to give them a little bit of a shout out, is sort of becoming a repository of a lot of great information. So if I know that you guys are running this webinar series on, like, fundamentals of a lot of different instruments with some amazing professionals in the next couple of weeks. Everything from tambourine, vibraphone, crash cymbals, like, really amazing. So please check out Percussion Conservatory. But thank you to all the panelists for being here. Thanks for all the thoughtful questions from everyone. I hope this was helpful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I think the panelists would agree. Please don't hesitate to reach out to them, because we all really are here to help you navigate this complex process. Because once you get on our side of the experience, it's just an unbelievably rewarding and fulfilling lifestyle. So we hope you can join us in that. So thanks, everybody.
All right. From all of us here, have a good night or a good day, wherever it is for you in the world. And until the next time, we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.